We're back in the woods to talk about the Fujifilm X-T4. This camera is slowly getting old. It came out in 2020, so it's definitely been a while, and I just want to go over if this camera is still worth buying. I've used it for the past 2 weeks. I've also used the Fujifilm X-T3, which is more or less the same camera, for years, so I think I'm qualified to tell you all about this camera and to tell you if I think it's still worth it or not. So I got the Fujifilm X-T4 a few weeks ago, and since then I used it on a wedding, on a portrait shoot, on a couple portrait shoots actually. I've used it to film videos, and I think I got to know it quite well in those few weeks, and it definitely confirmed what I was thinking. And what I was thinking is that this is just an upgraded X-T3, a more reliable and, let's say, better X-T3. So to start off, I want to talk about the build quality of the camera, and this thing is definitely built well. It feels solid in your hand. The grip is much better than the X-T3, all the dials feel solid, everything about this camera feels nice and premium. I also had the X-T5 in my hand for a little while, and I think the X-T4 is much better feeling. It feels more solid and it feels better than the X-T5 in your hand. The camera is also weather sealed, which is definitely a plus. Supposedly it's a little bit better weather sealing than what we got in the X-T3, and I had the X-T3 in rain and in snow and I never had any issues, so I would trust this thing in whatever conditions you put it in. The buttons on the X-T4, like any other Fujifilm cameras, are completely customizable, which is a big plus for me because I like to change quite a lot when it comes to the button layout and when it comes to what each button does. So that's probably one of my favorite features of Fujifilm cameras. It has a dual card slot, and compared to the X-T3, it does shoot both photo and video on both cards, which is really important if you're doing client work, if you're doing anything that doesn't happen twice that you can't repeat. You're sure that even if a card fails, you still have it on the other card, and the chances of 2 cards failing at once are almost impossible, so you will be fine with this. Also, something that this camera has that no other X-T camera has is the flip out screen, which for some people might be a pro, for some people might be a con. I personally like more the style of screen that you find on the X-T5 and X-T3, but I also don't really mind the flip out screen. My X-H2S has one as well, and it's not a problem. It's just a thing of preference, but it's still a screen. It works, it's nice, you can see what you have to see, so it's fine. You just get used to it and you don't even notice it anymore. So when it comes to the sensor, the X-T4 has the same sensor as the X-T3 and as a ton of different cameras in the Fujifilm system, like the XS20, like the XS10, like the X100V, and yeah, basically all the camera in that generation. It has the X-Transforce sensor that has 26.1 megapixels, and in my opinion that's the perfect number. I really don't like the 40 megapixels in the newer Fujifilm cameras because I don't want those file sizes, so 26 megapixel more than enough. It's sharp enough, you can crop quite a bit, it has good image quality, it has great colors, so for me 26 is the sweet spot. The ISO range is 160 to 12,800, but for me, usable ISO, I would say, stops at 6,400. I did push my X-T3 to 10,000 and even 12,800, but had to do quite a bit of denoise to get usable images. In the end, the images were good and they were usable, but if possible, I try to stick to 6,400 or below. Also, when you're pushing the ISO, try to get the exact exposure you need. Don't shoot underexpose and then bring it up in post, because that's just gonna reveal a whole bunch of noise that you don't really want. So rather bump up the ISO than shoot underexpose and then fix it in post. Another thing that this camera shares with all the other cameras in the same generation is the processor, which is the X Processor 4. It's a processor, it processes, I don't know, it works, it's better than the 3, it's worse than the 5, but it's good. The autofocus in the camera is, I would say, usable. It's definitely not the best. The eye tracking, it's not ideal, it's not on Sony level or Canon level or whatever you want to say, but it's better than what Fujifilm currently has on the X-H2S because they ruined it with the firmware, but that's a different story. I would say autofocus is reliable if you only have one subject in the frame and if they're not moving fast. But I would say continuous autofocus with just a box is more than reliable and more than good enough for whatever you need it. So generally I stick to continuous autofocus and I stick with just moving the box around wherever I need it, and that's it. A big upgrade for the X-T4 was IBIS. So this was the second attempt of Fujifilm giving IBIS to a camera. The first one was the X-H1, and the X-H1 IBIS was praised by some people and hated by others. The X-T4 IBIS is maybe slightly better than the X-H1. Is definitely not best in class, is definitely not better than many other systems you have out there, but it's an IBIS. It does what it needs to do. It won't replace your gimbal, but it will help you get decent handheld footage, and compared to having no IBIS, it's definitely a big step up. So I'm really happy that it has it, and using it for video has proven to be much better than my X-T3 just because of the IBIS alone. The X-T4 shoots 4K 24 and 30 frames per second uncropped, and then 60 frames per second with a 1.18 crop, which is not that noticeable. I would prefer having the full sensor readout, but 1.18 is not a major crop and it doesn't change your field of view that much, so I'm kind of fine with it. I did shoot a lot with my X-T3 in 4K 60 and it was basically never a big issue, so it's still not a big issue in the X-T4 and I still don't mind it that much. The video specs in this camera are amazing. You get 10-bit internal 420, which is great if you want to color grade your footage. You get F-Log. You also get F-Log View Assist, which is something you didn't get in previous cameras. And having the ability to shoot F-Log but actually see colors on your screen and not just seeing the flat image that you get with F-Log really helps you with composing your shots and having an idea of what your shots will look like after you color grade them in editing. So it's definitely a big plus for me. And the last thing I want to mention is glass. So at this point there's a huge array of lenses, both first party and third party, for the Fujifilm X mount. I've used quite a bit of them and there's a lot of really affordable, really good glass, like the new Viltrox lenses 13, 27 and 75. You get fast aperture at a low price with great autofocus performance. You have the new Suri, I don't know how to say it, f1.2 primes, which seem great. They don't have the best image quality out there, but they are quite affordable, and an f1.2 aperture is amazing. And there's also Sigma, Tamron, and obviously all the Fujifilm glass there is out there, so you have quite a lot of choices, and this is something really important when choosing a camera system. I would definitely say the X-T4 is still competitive and still worth it even now, and it still has some great features in it. Maybe the autofocus is lacking a bit for what's out there right now, but you can still get amazing results with this camera. So I would say if you're in the market for an X-T4, X-T3 or X-T5, I would probably go for the X-T4 right now. That's my opinion on the camera. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.